Hi guys, and welcome back to another True Crime Japan video. This story might hit close to home for a lot of us foreign English teachers here in Japan, just because we know what situation the victim was in coming to Japan to fulfill a dream of teaching English here in Japan. However, this English teacher's life was cut short by a man she barely knew who she offered to do English lessons with. She was found in a bath filled with soil on the man's balcony, and he became the most wanted man in Japan for 2.5 years. So let's start with the background of the victim in this case. Her name was Lindsay Hooker and she was 22 years old. She was born and raised in England, and she had a well-rounded family with her parents and her 2 sisters. She graduated with a major in biology from University of Leeds, and she was planning to continue to do her masters, but she decided she wanted a break from studying, so she decided to come and teach in Japan. So she moved to Japan in 2006 and decided to work for Nova, which was the biggest private English conversational school in Japan at the time. She moved to an area called Koiwa, which is in the Tokyo region. She loved Japan. She did everything that any of us would do in Japan. She traveled, she soaked up sights, she lived the normal expat life in Japan. So we are going to fast forward to the last days of Lindsay's life. At this point, she had lived in Japan for about 5 months now. On March 20th, 2007, she was sitting on a train heading home and she noticed the man sitting across from her. This man's name was Tatsuya Ichihashi. He was 28 at the time and he was unemployed. However, he lived off a pretty hefty allowance from his parents. His dad was a medical doctor and his mum was a dentist. He had no prior convictions apart from this one mark on his record where he was accused of trying to steal a handbag from a woman, but it was settled outside of court, and this happened 6 years prior. He had a girlfriend at the time. They had been dating for a year. He was obsessed with working out, and he was also really into violent manga. So Lindsay didn't really take any extra notice of him until he approached her when she was exiting her station heading to her bike. He approached her and said, "Hey, you're my English teacher," and Lindsay looked back at him and was like, "No, I'm not." And then she continued getting on her bike and started biking home, but then he started running next to her and was like trying to upkeep the conversation and started asking about university and where she's from and asking her if she wanted to do English lessons with him. So she finally got home with him still there. He ran all the way home with her and he asked for a glass of water because he was tired. So Lindsay felt bad for him and she ended up inviting him up to her apartment. It is thought she did this though out of precaution because she did live with 2 other people, and she wanted him to know that she did live with other people and not alone. He came up to the apartment, had a drink of water, and they arranged to have an English lesson in the following days. While he was at the apartment, he drew a picture of Lindsay and left all of his details, including his name, phone number, and email address. Very creepily and weirdly, his email address was whitelover@hotmail.com. Now, if this wasn't a red flag, I don't know what is. However, Lindsay was a really caring, trusting, and helpful person. She saw the good in people and would never expect someone to do bad. So she agreed to do an English lesson with him for the payment of 3,500 yen, which would be paid at the end of the lesson. On Sunday the 25th of March, Lindsay and Ichihashi met up at a cafe nearby to do the English lesson. Lindsay was scheduled to work that day at about 10 or 11 a.m. so she was going to do this English conversation lesson and then she would head to her job. There's surveillance of them chatting at the coffee store and at the counter, ordering the drinks and having the conversation lesson. So the lesson finished and it was time for him to pay. Now this is where things got a little strange. He told her that he didn't have enough money in his wallet to pay for the lesson, so he suggested that they would take a taxi back to his apartment where he would get the money for her and she could use that taxi to head onwards to her job. She agreed to this and they both hopped into a taxi heading to his apartment. The taxi arrived and he somehow convinced her to go up to the apartment with him. So she told the taxi driver to wait. She just needed to grab some money and she'll be right back down, and she needed him for another ride. But the taxi driver waited for a total of 7 minutes, and then he decided to go ahead and take another job because he thought maybe she didn't need the taxi anymore. So he left. Now I'm going to be talking about what happened in the apartment after she entered with Ichihashi. She entered and she was immediately beaten, perhaps even knocked out, because he ended up gagging her and tying her arms and legs with like garden plastic ties. He raped her and strangled her to death. It was at 3:30 p.m. on the 26th of March, after Lindsay missed another shift at work, when she was reported missing by her colleague. It is reported that her roommates had already reported her missing the day prior, but the information wasn't passed on properly at the time, which is very concerning. I do think that's got to do with the fact that they were foreigners and probably weren't taken seriously, in my humble opinion. Meanwhile, in Ichihashi's apartment, he moved his bathtub from his bathroom out onto his balcony, and he put Lindsay's body inside. He then proceeded to go to the hardware gardening store a total of 6 times and picked up a whole lot of soil. He also purchased a special kind of chemical that is used for composting. I guess it's to kind of decompose things at a faster rate. So he did that and shaved off all of her hair, because I guess he knew that hair doesn't decompose as fast as flesh and bones do. He was hoping the body would eventually decompose and get rid of all evidence. However, the police were already onto him. They searched Lindsay's apartment and found the picture that he had drawn of Lindsay with all of his details on it. So 2 officers were dispatched to his apartment. However, they weren't permitted to knock on the door without reasonable cause. I mean, I think that's reasonable cause in my opinion, but whatever. But they scouted the apartment and they found out his records from the handbag snatching thing. So they decided that they did have reasonable cause to enter the apartment. So they called for backup. So like 7 more police officers came. So they knocked on the door and Ichihashi answered the door, and the police officers informed him of the situation and saying that someone had gone missing and they wanted to talk to him. Ichihashi then proceeded to straight up run away. He had no shoes on, he grabbed a rucksack and he proceeded to run. One officer tried to grab his rucksack and pulled it off him, but Ichihashi just ran away. And he was super fit as well, so he was able to literally just run away. He just ran away, and this was the start of a 2.5-year manhunt for this man, and he simply just ran away. I will never get that. He had no shoes on and he just ran away. I don't get that, but that's what happened. So the police entered the apartment and found her body in the bathtub. Her parents were notified and were obviously absolutely distraught, and Lindsay's dad and boyfriend flew to Tokyo to formally identify her body. Like I said, this was the beginning of an excruciating battle to find Ichihashi, who was on the run for 2.5 years. At first, Ichihashi wandered around the Tokyo region in hiding, staying at internet cafes and the like. He then went north to Aomori Prefecture, where he twice tried to cut off part of his bottom lip to make it thinner to change his appearance. The first time he couldn't do it because of the pain, so he ended up finishing it off at a public bathroom, and he wore surgical masks to cover his scars and his identity, and wearing a mask in Japan is very common, so no one would have looked twice. While on the run, he carefully avoided security cameras at shops and didn't make eye contact with anyone. He changed his location quickly and often when he thought that people had identified him. And even though there was huge speculation that he was receiving money from his well-off family, he claims that he didn't contact any of his friends or his family. So at one point, he walked past a police station and saw a wanted poster with his face on it. This particular poster was emphasizing the 2 moles on his face, so then he decided to cut them both off with a box cutter. Throughout this entire time, the Hookers never stopped fighting for their daughter. They made multiple trips to Japan to continue spreading awareness of the perpetrator and their daughter. They stood at stations and passed out leaflets for hours and hours and days, doing everything they could to spread the awareness. I think the fact that they were pushing his face out into the public eye was really, really important. You know, this man was out there, he was just living out in the public, and people see him every day. People would see him. It's Japan, it's so busy, people see him. But all it takes is one person to recognize who he is and call in. So what they were doing was hugely crucial to the investigation for sure, in my opinion. So eventually Ichihashi ran out of money, so he got a construction job at an Osaka company which paid $1,500 a month. I don't know how he got that job, but he did. He was able to stay in the company housing for free, so he was able to save up money for cosmetic procedures. He got eyelid surgery, nose surgery, cheek fillers, and tried to change the shape of his mouth. Just anything that would change his appearance. His extreme pursuit to change the way he looked ended up being the way that he was caught, essentially. He went into a surgery clinic in Nagoya wanting to narrow his nose and kind of lift the ridge of his nose. They performed the surgery, but 3 days after the surgery, the surgeon got a little suspicious and reported him to the police. The surgeon had taken photos of him, which is pretty standard when doing cosmetic surgery, and this photo was released to the public 10 days after it had been taken. Ichihashi saw the updated wanted poster of him, so he collected his paycheck from the Osaka company and tried to flee. Ichihashi was finally caught on November 10th, 2009. He was at a ferry terminal in Osaka trying to travel to Okinawa, which are islands very south of the mainland Japan. A member of public recognized him and told the ferry staff, and the ferry staff called the police. The police immediately came to the ferry terminal and approached him and asked him what his name was, and he said, "I am Ichihashi," which is probably the first time he's used his real name in 2.5 years. He was then arrested at first for the abandonment of a corpse, and then he was later charged with the rape and murder of Lindsay Hooker. And during the time he was detained leading up to the trial, he actually wrote a book about his life on the run, and it was published. And guys, get this, a movie was made about him. A movie. I saw previews of the movie, I'll link it down below, but I just think it's so disgusting and so wrong how they've made this movie and portrayed him as a hero after he's just killed a beautiful, young, innocent girl. It's gross and it doesn't sit right with me, it doesn't sit right with Lindsay's family at all, and it doesn't sit right with the majority of people who know about it. I don't know how they managed to get the rights to make that, but it's disgusting. But Ichihashi was finally brought to justice in July 2011, where he was sentenced to life in prison. Lindsay's family were relieved that this was finally over. I will insert a clip here of the press conference after the trial.
We've waited a long time for today. We've waited 4.5 years to get justice for Lindsay, and we have achieved that today, and we're very pleased.
Thank you.
検察庁の方で判決の内容についても今詳しくもう一度説明を受けたところです。その間、判決の量刑についても十分納得した顔で受け止めていましたので、一つの大きなステップだったのかなというふうに私は感じています。
Before I end this video, I want to kind of make a public service announcement about safety in Japan. Just like Lindsay, we come to Japan to teach, to learn and experience a different way of life. We know Japan is one of the safest countries on earth, and it's very, very easy to fall into a false sense of security here. This false sense of security can be very, very dangerous. Just because someone is Japanese doesn't excuse creepy, weird behavior. And also, just because someone is Japanese doesn't mean that they're polite and nice and have the best intentions for you. There are evil people all across this globe, Japan included. So please, all expats in Japan, particularly women, please be careful. Please do not trust so easily. If someone is following you home or is giving you creepy vibes in general, go to the nearest convenience store or police box to report it. Remember, always prioritize your safety over being polite and nice to a stranger. This is the end of my video for today. After seeing the footage and photos of Lindsay's family, is just so heartbreaking. They fought so hard to get justice for their daughter, and in the end they did get that for her. So I pray for her family and the everlasting healing that they're going to need. Yeah, just the message of this video, please, you cannot be too careful. Do not fall into this false sense of security feeling in Japan, because it's simply not true. That mindset could put you in serious danger. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys in my next one. Thanks, guys.